Hi, this is Karen O'Brien, and I wanted to do a series of videos that kind of show us some of the features in the new Build 25 release. So we'll start with the What's New, which takes us to the newsletter, which is a pretty decent outline of what's in Build 25. You can see here that we have a multiple domain processing tool. We might not get to that in this video, but that's going to be a whole tutorial. So you'll have a 2-hour webinar on that in a couple of weeks, or maybe a few weeks. I honestly don't know. It's on the webinar schedule. We're going to talk today about HDF5 input, and we'll see how far we get. We'll try to do this in about 10 minutes. Okay, so what we'll do, we'll start with HDF5 input. So that's the latest update to the Flow2D Pro engine and the Flow2D Gila plugin. And so you can only use this input file if you have Build 25. All right, so let's do this. Let's open the documentation because I want to show you something about HDF5 models or HDF5 data files. They basically are set up in groups. So if I click on one of these, I'll click on grid. What you see over here is this is the input. So this was from a project called, well, we don't want this to say rainbow.hdf5. We want it to say input.hdf5. So this is not the best example. I need to modify this image. But basically what you get is an input file that is a collection of tables that are grouped together so that you can quickly find the table that you want to look for. And as you can see, if you're looking in the grid layer, you have the grid code, which is your grid element number, your X and Y coordinates, which would be the centroid of each of these individual grid element numbers, the elevation, which would be the elevation of the corresponding grid element numbers, and of course the end value, which again is the end value of the corresponding grid element numbers. Also get the neighbors table, which helps Flow2D engine rectify which grid elements share discharge. Now, if you look at one of these values that's in red, that value will be part of the data input manual. So in the new documentation, we have moved all of the Flow2D documents to the online format. So if you click on the data input manual, you'll get, and we go to usually to chapter 4 because that's our variable descriptions. You can get a list of the DAT files, but these kind of correlate with the HDF5 files. But the HDF5 documentation is in the Flow2D Gila Technical Reference Manual. So we get here, Data Input Manual. If I do Control F and I look for Xcord, you can see that this would be, the Xcord is in topo.dat and cadpts.dat, but this would be the description for that value. So you can see that Xcord is a variable name. It is a real number. It doesn't have a range, so that just is a little infinity sign. And and then this is the file description. Now, if the variable is green, as you would see if you were in boundary conditions and inflow, you can see right here, if the variable is green, that's just an internal tool that links this table or this variable to this table. So that's just internal. You won't see that in the data input manual. But you can pretty much clearly see that it is connected between the two tables. So that is the HDF5 output. Now, how do you get HDF5 input, or sorry, that's the HDF5 input file, but how do you get that input file? So if you open QGIS and you export a project, you can do it one of two ways. For example, if you do a quick run, you can come here and let's just new folder, HDF5 example. And we can select the folder and it will ask us, do you want to export your model? I'll say yes. And note that the infiltration switch is turned off. And so it's not going to export infiltration. But if you wanted to turn infiltration on, you would just click that checkbox and it would turn it on and export the data. But we'll just leave it off. Click OK. And it's going to export the model. That is finished. So we can see that. Let's see, where did that go? Projects, examples. So let's do this. Projects, Arizona, Pima. And so now you can see this is our input file. So if I open it in HDF view, you can see that it will load, and these are your groups. And so if you open one of these groups, let's do control parameters, you can see the control parameters. So that's now all of these are mapped with the documentation, okay? Now, if I open HDF view again, I'm going to open a blank one. I'm going to copy this, but I think it should load me right. It should take me right there. And I click open. Oops, sorry, I did that wrong. I apologize. If I click file, open as, read write, let's paste that in there. We'll open that file. And then if I go to these control parameters again, I can change this variable to, let's say we only want it to run for 5 hours, or let's say 8 hours. And then when I close that table, it'll ask, do I want to save it? I will say yes. And then I will close HDF view. Now that has been modified outside of QGIS, but when I click OK, it's going to start the run even with that new parameter. And so that will only run for 8 hours. So it's going to read the input.hdf5. It's just one single file. And then it will export. At this point, I think it's exporting your .out files, but I'll have to do a whole tutorial on how to export HDF5 files. So I'll minimize that and just let that continue to run. So that's HDF5. It just basically simplifies your DAP file system in a meaningful way. Okay, let's see, what else did we get? We have new training coming up. So I want to show you two things in the new training. First of all, we'll do the webinar registration. I don't know, does that? Yeah, that does open a new tab. Sweet. Okay, good. So we have coming up HDF5 methods, how to use HDF5 data. Also, the hydrologic data workshop, which is a free workshop, self-paced free. We'll show you that in a second. Review a Flow 2D project using the new review tools. A 2-hour workshop to learn how to do multiple domain modeling. And then I think this would be like our next new kit. Nope, this is old. This needs to be updated. So I'll have to fix this one. So this just needs to be updated. Okay, so that's new webinars. So I think we're done with that. But into the new webinars, I did want to show you that if you are on the documentation, and it's just documentation.flow-2d.com, how do you get to it? Well, if you're on the home page and you go here, you can load it. I'm going to open in a new tab. So it's to connect to it from the home page, you want to open in a new tab. And then here are the tutorials. What we've done is we've updated the self-help HeLa to put the text back into it. So it's now step-by-step instructions on how to do urban model. So this is a very comprehensive workshop. So if you're doing urban modeling, I highly recommend it. And then this is the newest one. I took this workshop to Arizona Floodplain Managers Association, and I think it's a really good workshop, but I wanted to give it to everyone for free because it's extremely handy. Like it just shows you how to do so many things with GIS. So the point of the workshop is how do you connect QGIS to data servers, right? So this would be elevation, this would be land cover, hydrography, FEMA models, so you can connect to your FEMA models, and then levee database. And then this would be how to use that data. So module 1, part 2 is load your project, which you can see that this is, well, basically what we're going to do is we're going to start with kind of a project that's already here, but we're going to build it. We're also going to build it. So this gives you the information that's in your project. This is what comes with the module. And this is how to load a watershed. So you'll load a watershed, and then you'll isolate a single watershed that we're going to study for this project. And This would how to process the elevation data from that online data. So how to download and connect to and download elevation data. And then see right here, that's the elevation data, and you can see it's in meters. And then you can, I think after a while, it also shows you how to convert it to feet. Yeah, right here. Shows you right here how to convert it to feet. And then if something happens to your elevation data during your download, this shows you how to patch it. So sometimes your elevation data will download and it'll have holes in it where it missed a tile. So you can patch it really easily. Okay. Module 4 is land cover data, how to connect to land cover data using the curve number generator and using the tools that we connect, directly connecting to the data. It also shows you how to connect to the world land cover data, which is the ESA, European Satellite Agency data. So if you're not inside the United States, this is a really good processing, or a really good tool right here for land cover data. Then it shows you how to use that land cover data to create end values. So the workshop comes along with these little processor models to create end values. We'll be adding those to the Flow2D plugin this year, but they haven't been added to it yet. Processing rainfall data. So this is like a uniform rain on grid, but using a real-time rainfall event. So basically this was a rainfall event in Tucson, and it has this pattern right here. This would be like the intensity of that rainfall, or not really the intensity, just the hours on the left and percent total accumulation on the right. And so you can see here that these are the levels of intensity right there. And of course, that's coming from gauges. And then in this gauge data, we ended up with like a total rainfall of 9.09 was our gauge, but not every gauge got that full 9 inches. So you can see right here is you can kind of apply the different reduction factors to your grid so that you're only getting, and so instead of these grids would get 9.09 inches, these grids would get 7 inches, and down here we get 6.73. But in this case, you're still using this same pattern for everything, and that's not exactly realistic because we do know that this storm moved during the storm event. So if the storm moves during the storm event, you can use a real-time rainfall. And in this case, I used the Copernicus satellite data to download the real-time rainfall, but that is not gauge calibrated. So if you wanted to gauge calibrate that, you would process it. And we did not put into this workshop how to gauge calibrate the data, but we did show you how to download and apply the data to your grid. And then gauge calibrating it would be a little bit more intense. So shows you how to access the Copernicus downloader, how to find your year and your event, and how to download that data. That's Module 5. And then Module 6 shows you all about the different infiltration processors, the green and amped method, the SCS method. Doesn't do Horton, but Horton is covered in the self-help kit. And then how to process buildings. So how to connect to OpenStreetMap, download your buildings, and then process your buildings from OpenStreetMap. So it's a really nice, excellent little workshop to connect to mapping and modeling data. I think that's it. I think I'm going to stop the video here, and I will continue on to the rest of the rest of the new features in the next video.